When summer arrives in America, wealth migrates predictably. New money floods Miami and Aspen. Celebrities flock to the Hamptons. Tech billionaires retreat to Hawaiian compounds. But true old money, the kind that speaks in whispers rather than Instagram posts, still gravitates to a singular destination, Newport, Rhode Island. You see, this rocky Atlantic outpost represents something unique in American culture. Wealth that has transformed into heritage. Money that has aged like fine wine into something richer and more complex than mere affluence. And while America constantly reinvents itself through technological and cultural revolutions, Newport stands as a counterpoint. A place where tradition reigns supreme, where family connections outweigh bank balances, and where the ultimate luxury isn't what you own, but who you are. In today's episode of Old Money Mansions, we share the story of how a small Rhode Island town became the capital of American old money, a place where wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in decades. If you've ever wondered where the truly rich go to escape the merely wealthy, Newport, Rhode Island is near the top of the list. You see, in the year 2025, Newport remains as one of the undisputed crown jewels of old money America, a place where family names matter more than bank balances and where summer cottages are actually 40-room mansions with ocean views that would make billionaires weep with envy. And the aristocratic playground that once hosted the Vanderbilts and Astors now serves as an ultimate status symbol for today's elite, who still flock to this coastal paradise like moths to a flame of exclusivity. But let's be brutally honest, Newport doesn't just represent wealth, it represents the right kind of wealth. The Preservation Society of Newport County now welcomes over 1,300,000 visitors annually, allowing commoners like us to peek behind the curtain of America's closest thing to aristocracy. But make no mistake, while you may tour the breakers for $32, joining the exclusive Bailey's Beach Club still requires the right bloodline or a letter of recommendation from someone whose grandfather's grandfather made a fortune in railroads. Technology billionaires like Larry Ellison have spent $100 million renovating properties here, desperate to buy the one thing their Silicon Valley fortunes can't instantly acquire, the patina of history. Joan Didion once brilliantly observed there was a sense not of how prettily money can be spent, but of how harshly money is made, a tension that defines Newport to this day. For what makes Newport truly fascinating isn't just the obscene wealth on display, but the peculiar American contradiction it represents, a democracy that created its own version of aristocracy. But how did this modest colonial settlement transform into America's old money capital? The answer lies in a remarkable journey from religious refuge to maritime powerhouse, a story of tolerance and trade that would lay the foundations for unimaginable wealth to come. Newport's story begins not with wealth, but with something far more revolutionary: religious freedom. In 1638, Anne Hutchinson, banished from Massachusetts Bay Colony for challenging Puritan orthodoxy, led religious dissidents to Aquidneck Island. Within a year, William Coddington moved southward to establish Newport, drawn by its superior harbour. This physical relocation mirrored a profound ideological journey from religious conformity towards something America had never seen before: radical inclusion. The 1641 Newport Town Statutes declared no inhabitant would be molested for matters of conscience, provided they maintained civil peace. This stance attracted religious outcasts across the Atlantic. Quakers established their first meeting house in 1657, finding tolerance denied elsewhere in New England. Sephardic Jews fleeing the Spanish Inquisition arrived via Barbados by 1658, bringing commercial connections that would transform the colony. Seventh-day Baptists founded their congregation in 1671, while Anglicans constructed Trinity Church in 1698. Their steeple rising alongside meeting houses of denominations they persecuted elsewhere. Irish philosopher George Berkeley observed in 1729, "Here are fewer quarrels about religion than elsewhere. The people live peaceably with their neighbours of every persuasion. Yet this tolerance had limits. Jewish residents like Aaron Lopez faced citizenship barriers until 1762, securing naturalization through Massachusetts, not Rhode Island. While Newport's ideological foundations were laid in religious tolerance, its economic future was shaped by its magnificent natural harbor. This deepwater sanctuary accommodated ships up to 400 tons, a crucial advantage over shallow northern ports that limited commerce. Its strategic location midway between Boston and New York on protected Narragansett Bay positioned Newport perfectly for coastal trade. Local shipyards produced swift sloops ideal for commerce, vessels whose speed would later serve both legitimate trade and darker pursuits. By 1750, Newport boasted 150 vessels engaged in transatlantic commerce, rivaling fleets of much larger colonial ports. Records show Newport-built ships trading fish to Bristol as early as 1541. The arrival of Portuguese Jewish merchants truly catalyzed Newport's transformation, bringing capital and connections global networks stretching from Amsterdam to Curaçao, London to the Caribbean. The stage was set for Newport's first great accumulation of wealth, built upon religious freedom, maritime infrastructure, and global trade networks that would soon converge in a revolutionary system of commerce. Wealth came to Newport through innovation, exploitation, and global trade networks that transformed a small colonial port into America's wealthiest maritime center. The Portuguese Jewish community, though numerically small, exerted influence far beyond their numbers. Jacob Rodriguez Rivera arrived in 1745 and revolutionized the whaling industry by perfecting spermaceti candle production, extracting wax from sperm whale heads to create cleaner-burning candles, commanding premium prices throughout Europe. Aaron Lopez, arriving in 1752, became Newport's wealthiest merchant, operating 30 ships engaged in whale oil trade, Caribbean molasses imports, and manufactured goods exports. Naphtali Hart and Isaac Elise founded the United Company of Spermaceti Chandlers in 1761, creating a production cartel controlling prices and distribution. By 1770, Newport controlled 85% of America's candle exports, with 17 manufacturers producing 40,000 candles annually, illuminating drawing rooms from London to Paris. But beneath this prosperity lay Newport's economic engine, the notorious triangular trade binding rum, human bondage, and Caribbean molasses in a cycle of commerce and suffering. Newport's 22 distilleries produced over 100,000 gallons of rum annually, comprising 90% of New England's output. This Guinea rum became primary currency in West African slave markets, where a single enslaved person was traded for 200 gallons of rum, reducing human life to a commodity. Newport-based ships transported approximately 110,000 enslaved Africans between 1709 and 1807, representing 60% of all North American slaving voyages. Upon reaching the Caribbean, enslaved individuals were traded for molasses. Newport merchants imported 14,000 tons annually by 1770, enough to produce 2 million gallons of rum. This cycle generated annual revenues exceeding £100,000, equivalent to $25 million today. This economic system reached its zenith between 1740 and 1770, when Newport stood as America's fifth largest city, its wealth per capita exceeding even Philadelphia and Boston. The skyline reflected this prosperity. Touro Synagogue, America's oldest surviving Jewish temple, rose in 1763, while the Redwood Library, America's first lending library, opened in 1747. But this golden age proved short-lived, as revolutionary winds brought forces that would upend Newport's prosperity. The British Navy, once protector of colonial trade, would soon target Newport precisely because of its commercial importance to the revolutionary cause, devastating the city's economy and creating conditions for Newport's most unlikely transformation. The American Civil War ended, and Newport's third transformation began, from faded colonial port to America's most exclusive aristocratic playground. This metamorphosis represented a deliberate project by America's new industrial elite to create a social microcosm mirroring European nobility, yet distinctly American in its excess. The city's post-revolutionary decline created a vacuum initially filled by southern planters seeking respite from malaria-ridden summers, establishing what locals called the Carolinas Hospital. These southern families established boarding houses and social networks that later attracted northern industrialists after the Civil War changed the nation's economic landscape. Antebellum infrastructure, including early cottages built by families like the Schermerhorns and Lorellards, laid the groundwork for what would become an explosion of architectural ambition. By 1890, the summer colony had crystallized into a self-sustaining institution, with 400 elite families spending $20 million annually, equivalent to $670 million today, during the 8-week social season. Central to this ecosystem was Ward McAllister, the self-appointed gatekeeper who distilled Newport's social hierarchy into his infamous 400 list, purportedly based on the capacity of Mrs. Astor's ballroom. This roster enforced a rigid caste system that privileged knobs, old money, over swells, new money, requiring not just wealth, but generational continuity for full social acceptance. Families like the Vanderbilts, despite their industrial fortunes, needed 3 generations of Newport residency to gain full acceptance, intensifying competition as Parvenus commissioned ever grander mansions to signal their ascent. The colony's economic engine relied on a symbiotic relationship between old and new money, with southern planters' initial investments evolving into a hospitality empire catering to northern tycoons. Hotels like the Francis Malbone House, originally a colonial-era smuggler's residence, were repurposed as luxury accommodations for families like the Astors and Morgans seeking entry to Newport society. By the 1880s, Newport's seasonal economy revolved around servicing oligarchs. Local merchants reported 300% markup on goods sold to cottagers, while labourers earned double the national average tending to sprawling estates. In a society that denied women formal political power, Newport's social sphere became a matriarchal dominion, with women wielding unparalleled influence through ritual, architecture, and philanthropy. The 1883 Vanderbilt Ball marked a watershed moment. Alva Vanderbilt delayed entry until Mrs. Astor acknowledged her family's status, weaponizing hospitality to rewrite social hierarchies. Social survival demanded mastery of coded rituals like the calling card system, which functioned as a merciless meritocracy. Ladies made daily visits between 3 and 5 p.m., leaving engraved cards that served as social currency. Newport's cottages became matriarchal fiefdoms, with women commissioning 65% of Gilded Age estates, including Alva Vanderbilt's Marble House, 1892, an $11 million birthday gift to herself. Designed by Richard Morris Hunt, Marble House's 500,000 cubic feet of imported marble physically manifested Alva's divorce from patriarchal control, making architectural statements that words could not. These mansions were physical extensions of Wall Street's financial machinery, with 85% of Newport's elite deriving their wealth from railroads, steel, or banking between 1870 and 1915. The private rail cars transporting financiers from New York to Newport epitomized this nexus, outfitted with mahogany desks and telegraphic equipment that enabled tycoons like J.P. Morgan to conduct business during the 150-mile journey. It was aboard such cars that pivotal deals like the 1901 formation of U.S. Steel were likely negotiated, merging Carnegie Steel with Federal Steel and National Tube to create a $1.4 billion behemoth. The architects of these mansions weaponized materials to reflect industrialists' global dominance. Richard Morris Hunt's design for the breakers, 1893 to 1895, employed revolutionary steel trusses and asbestos insulation borrowed from railroad construction. But this golden age could not last forever, and when the stock market crashed in 1929, Newport faced yet another transformation, one that would preserve its Gilded Age splendor while fundamentally changing its character. The question remained, Would Newport become a museum to past glories, or would it find a way to reinvent itself once more for the modern era? The 1929 stock market crash initiated Newport's fourth transformation, from living playground of the elite to historical artifact preserved in architectural amber. The Great Depression struck Newport's summer colony with particular force, as industrial fortunes shrank and ostentatious wealth display suddenly seemed not just excessive, but obscene. Many mansions stood vacant, their maintenance costs unsustainable even for families of considerable means, as the economic crisis deepened throughout the 1930s. World War II brought further changes as the US Navy expanded its presence, temporarily converting some Gilded Age mansions into officers' quarters and military facilities. By the 1950s, these architectural treasures faced likely demolition as America turned towards suburban expansion and modernization. The establishment of the Preservation Society of Newport County in 1945 marked a crucial turning point, pioneering the mansion as museum concept that would ultimately save dozens of structures. Doris Duke's 1968 Newport Restoration Foundation further championed adaptive reuse, converting 80 properties into museums and apartments, maintaining historical accuracy while allowing contemporary function. This preservation created an unintended consequence, freezing Newport as a Gilded Age diorama, a living museum of America's aristocratic experiment, rather than a dynamic community. Modern billionaire purchases, like Oracle founder Larry Ellison's $100 million renovation of Beechwood in the early 2000s, now navigate strict preservation codes, forcing new money to conserve old money's legacy. The mansion's survival relies on innovative funding models, with 1.3 million annual visitors funding ongoing restorations. This commercial heritage model has preserved 2.5 million square feet of Gilded Age architecture, equivalent to 46 football fields, making Newport America's largest concentration of historic homes. Newport's modern renaissance began during the 1980s with the America's Cup sailing competition bringing international attention and investment to the waterfront. Development of upscale hotels and restaurants in the 1990s created tourism infrastructure, making Newport accessible beyond the ultra-wealthy. Film and television productions, most recently HBO's The Gilded Age series filming at the Breakers since 2021, have cemented Newport's place in cultural imagination, introducing it to younger generations. The influx of technology wealth in the 2010s and 2020s has created tensions around whether Newport is maintaining its distinctive character or becoming more like the Hamptons, a comparison making old Newport families shudder. This dynamic between old and new wealth mirrors the social conflicts that made the original Gilded Age so fascinating and relevant to understanding America's complex relationship with class and wealth. Educational initiatives have taken center stage, with Stanford University's 2023 study finding 78% of visitors gaining new understanding of wealth inequality's historical roots. Newport serves as both celebration and critique of American capitalism, a marble-clad paradox preserved in stone, forcing visitors to confront uncomfortable truths about how fortunes are made and maintained. And now we'd love to see you in the comments. Have you visited Newport before, or after having watched this video, would you like to? We can't wait to hear from you. And with that said, thanks for joining us for another episode of Old Money Mansions. Cheers. Until the next time.